Good morning, afternoon, evening, Vietnam. Good morning, Vietnam. Ever remember that? Robin Williams movie. Um, Amazing. Anyway, my name is Byron. I am here for the third module in the Dream Create Hustle course, where we're going to be talking about drafting. And drafting is kind of the formation of your idea. So the previous two stages, let's move to that slide. The previous two stages were design and discover. And in design, what we talked about was setting an intention and being clear about what it is that you wanted to do. Discover was doing research, making sure that you talk to the right people, read the right books or good books or, you know, blog posts and whatever to do, get more information that you needed to about whatever it is that you are trying to do. And in the draft phase, what we're going to do is after we did that broad search, we kind of hone down and figure out exactly what it is that we want to do, how we want to fulfill the intentions and values that we have for this particular thing. Um, there's more steps in the other stages. So, just real quick, the dream stage is where, the Dream Create Hustle course also could be more generally called Think, Plan, Act, or in the engineering and construction industry, they call it Design, Build, Operate. The design, dream, or think is you just come up with what it is that you want. The create, build, or plan phase, what you do is you start thinking about and gathering the resources to allow you to do that. And in the hustle, act, and operate, you do the work that you need to do to get it done, achieve your goal, live your dreams, all that good stuff. So that's the design, discover, and draft. And this is the Dream Create Hustle course. And it's the third in the modules out of 9. And what we're going to do here is talk about modeling the goal. So you have a goal, and what you want to do is create a small scale model of it. So it's basically something that is very small representation of what that is. If you're going to build a house, it might be a sketch, it might be a blueprint, but the blueprint is not the house. It might actually be a model of, made out of clay, sand, paper mache, whatever, just to show the shape and the size and the scale of it. And that's what drafting is. Drafting is starting to go through the process of defining more exactly what it is that you're going to do, how it's going to be accomplished, and, to help you get thinking about the resources that you need, etc. And usually, around this time or phase of thinking, people have struggles. So one of the struggles are, how specific do you have to get? So if you are building something for the first time, like let's say you were creating a car. Sometimes cars have little RC models where, remote control models where, they have all of the details of a car to scale. Like, when I was a kid, the Ferrari Testarossa was the thing. So you would buy a little, matchbox car of a Ferrari Testarossa. And the question is how specific and, how true to scale it was. Sometimes they would say like, 1 to 26 or 1 to 8, and, how many times smaller or bigger the model is compared to the actual thing, and how detailed do you have to get. Now, it all depends. If you're going to build a house, you may not need to buy miniature bricks to put on a facade. You might not need to create like little roofing shingles. You might just have, some plasterboard or, paper mache or, paper to just kind of give you a model. You might just actually keep it in drawings. So the specificity is kind of where you want to go. But the purpose of this is more to generate conversation about what it is that you want to create than to actually do the creation itself. So in a blueprint, what'll happen is, they'll an architect will say this has to be this far, this has to be this long, this has to be this wide, et cetera, so that the engineer can figure out what materials they need to use, what kind of tolerances that they need to use for the building of the structure, or things like that. And that's what you have to do. That's in the engineering phase, which is the next module. But this now we're just in the drafting phase, which is having the kind of parameters inside of which that conversation and those sets of decisions then take place. Accuracy, kind of near specificity. So accuracy has to be, something close to scale. So blueprints basically say, well, this is 1 inch of this blueprint represents, 2 feet in the eventual building. Or, if you look at Google Maps, there's a little bar that, as you zoom in and zoom out, that little bar says, whether it's 1 foot, 10 feet, 500 feet, 2 miles, 3 miles, etc. It basically gives you the scale or gradations of how much is represented on that map. People don't know how much they actually have to do. Like, does your blueprint actually have to include all of the grain of the wood? No. Does your blueprint have to include the texture of the outside? No. Now there are CAD models or computer assistant design models that you can actually pick the colors of the colors of the furniture, the types of wood, whether it's bamboo, it's a dark bamboo, or it's a light bamboo, it's in the herringbone patterns and that like all of those things are valid, but they're not always necessary to figure out what the structure is that you have to build and then create the conversations around those might come out in the actual particular details about types of wood might come out in the ensuing conversations, or particular materials that you might need to use for a dress if you're making dresses, or for a hat if you're making, whether there's a 5-panel hat or a 6-panel hat, whether it's structured or unstructured, things like this. And another thing that people struggle with is their level of expertise. You do not have to be an expert in order to create a draft. I can go down to, the paper store, buy engineering diagrams and fill it out badly to create a scale thing of something that I like. I don't actually have to be an architect for that to be useful. I can then take that to an architect and talk to her or him about, what could be done to improve it, or have them turn that into an actual blueprint. All of the model has to do is be close enough to represent the real thing, so you can have conversations with other people about them or about the model, so that they actually can look at and point at things instead of you just simply describing things, right? So in the first phase, we have, you're talking about your intentions, and, intentions and sketches are great. They give you a kind of like an effect that you want to create, whereas models and blueprints are more detailed in that they give you scale, and they give you, at least a beginning of conversation about what actually needs to happen in order for that to, or for you and the others to make that thing a reality. Okay, so this section is going to get you from unsure about how to combine materials to start compiling lists and types of things to use. So, you might not know how to put, I'm not even going to act like I'm a seamstress. So you might want to put cotton and match that with a polyester. You might not be sure how to do that. But it's cotton and polyester. So then when you talk to a manufacturer, you talk to them about, the spools, the thread, the machinery that they need to actually combine those. So once you start to identify the materials, it's up to the expert or the engineer to help you figure out how to compile them. So you're not going to be worried about that. You're going to be unclear about how to do the steps to complete the project, to being able to use the best enough tools and skills. So in this phase, we don't actually need to know all of the things that we need to do to achieve our goal. We're going to do best enough estimations, and we're going to find out, enough information to competently talk to and ask questions of these, subject matter experts of how to actually get this done. So, through our discovery phase, you'll have learned a lot of new terms and thought a lot of new thoughts about how to get things done. You take that information, and then you'll go to your particular subject matter experts or mentors, and have conversations with them, and they'll give you information about how to do X, Y, and Z using the best enough tools, rather than having to go how to learn, go learn Photoshop if you're going to do web development, or you don't have to go learn how to install and run servers if you're doing back end development, so you don't actually have to learn these things. You just need to be able to competently talk to the people that know how to do that and know which types of tools you will need to get this thing done. And we're also going to go from overpromising and under-delivering for yourself and others, because a lot of times people say, oh, I'm going to do this. It's going to be the best thing ever. And after they do it once or twice, it's like, oh, well, this is completely underwhelming. And you don't want to do that for yourself. So what you want to do, I know it sounds bad, is just set low expectations. Like I have a thing that, you don't know how to do anything until you do it 10 times. I taught myself how to cook this one dish, Indian curry. It is a fantastic dish, and it took me about an hour and 45 minutes to do it the first time because I was just so nervous. Like I got all the stuff, I cut it up, then I did this, and then I kept reading the instructions, and I went back and read the instructions and went back. And, after the first time, it was just, it was good, but it just took a long time. And if I said, yeah, I'm going to cook this because the recipe said an hour, that's for a particular level of cook, right? I wasn't that level of cook, so it took me an hour and 45 minutes. After the 10th time, I didn't have to look at and read the instructions 4 times. I just had to read it once, maybe skim back a little too, once or twice. And so it was the iterations and the doing it again and again and again that allowed me to figure out, oh, okay, well, it's going to take me this long. And it got faster and faster and faster. And now, what used to take me an hour and 45 minutes, now it takes me 45 minutes. Yay me, right? And we're going to go from overpromising and under-delivering, basically breaking your promise, to overestimating your effort and complexity until proven wrong. So if I go read a new dish, and it says it's going to take an hour, I'm going to tell myself that's going to take an hour and a half, because I have to account for all of the things that I'm not thinking about. Did I cut this up? Is this in the right thing? Did I get all of the tools out, etc.? So what I want to do is I want to think that it takes more time and it's more complex than I see at first, and then through experience validate how good that is. Now, because I did this Indian curry dish, when I see a new recipe, I see the ingredients, I understand how complex it is. I see you only have to chop this, you don't have to do this you do have to do, that you don't have to do. You put them over here in batches of 3 instead of individual throughout the process, etc. So when I read the recipe, which are the instructions to do it in that sequence, then I'm like, oh, okay. I have a better sense of how much how much effort it's going to take and how long it's going to take me. But in the beginning, I make sure that I overestimate the effort and complexity until I'm proven wrong. And this does a lot of things. First, it gives you room to breathe, because you don't want to say something's going to take 2 weeks and then it take 3, and then you're behind the deadline. You're upset at yourself. Other people are upset at you, etc. You tell them it's going to take 3 weeks, and then when you deliver it faster, hey, that's great. Now, all of that happens if you have a good draft. When you are pretty clear about what the end result is and the process to get there, then you can start giving people, oh, this is a relatively accurate representation of what it is that we're going to do. All right. So this is draft, right? Now, what we talked about before was the discovery process. And what we're also going to do is go from having a lot of patterns that we could possibly create to starting to look at one particular pattern. And this one particular pattern, this is by artist name, I think Raphael Arjuno. I forget the last name, what he is. But what this represents is, I'm using this for 2 reasons. 1, it's butterflies. Who doesn't like butterflies? 2, spiral. I like spirals too. And 3, that you also see the lines that he created as sketch, as like a blueprint. So in addition to having the blueprint, he has a pretty detailed representation of some of these butterflies, depending on how close they are, how far they are, etc. And when we're in the drafting stage, what we're kind of between the blueprint, which is the abstract mathematical relationships and spatial relationships, and the actual textures in the world of what that's going to do. And that's in contrast to the previous stage where we searched, high and low, catalogs, supplier websites, Google, blogs, articles, etc., to make sure that we have a vast knowledge of what types of things can be done in different contexts, and even searching different keywords based on their roots and whatnot to find all of the things that might be relevant to whatever we're trying to do. And then now that we've done that, we're moving to a model where we have just one thing that we're just going to do butterflies. We're not going to do smaller insects. We're not going to do grasshoppers. We're not going to do cars. We're not going to do t-shirts. Just butterflies. And this is probably two forms of a particular type of butterfly. So not even just, monarch butterflies, or this type of butterfly. So moving from a very broad domain into a very specific domain allows us to then be sure that, okay, now that we know what it is that we want, we created a particular draft. And in creating that draft, we start to, let's say, really weird word, operationalize what it is that we've learned. Soon as you look at something and start drawing something, the act of drawing will start to make whatever you're doing have so much more sense, because you're actually integrating and concretizing all of the abstract knowledge into a particular product. And over time, what's going to happen is you're going to get good at that process. So what you're going to get from this is something to talk about. So the end result of the draft phase is not, the draft in the model is not, it's an example of whatever you're trying to create, so that you can talk to, the other people in your life about this, your customers, your suppliers, your bosses, your clients, all of the people that it is related to. You will have conversations with them according to whatever role they have in the process. And, also in the Dream, Create, Hustle course, we identify a particular question that we use to identify, each stage. In the first stage, we had why. In the design phase, that is trying to figure out the core values that you want to create, and the core values that you want to embody with whatever you're building, and the intentions that you have behind that. And then second phase, discover, we have whether. And what we do is we search about, whether this is possible at all, whether this is right for you, whether this is right for your team, your company, your family. Like, what are the conditions inside of which that this thing will work or won't work. Yeah, probably experienced a little bit of a shake. That was me. I had to turn the lights on because recording in the dark is not cool. So the core question is which. So in the beginning was why, then we looked whether this type of thing was working for us. And then this is which. Which thing are we going to create? Out of all of the possibilities that we were talking about, we were thinking about, we were discussing, we were pondering, which one are we going to do? So when you go down and select a particular domain that you're working in, the question is which, right? And this course this module will help you figure out, or it will help you figure out how to detail which thing you have chosen, okay? And each section has a theme. So we have a couple of themes in here. We have the outline, the dimensions, the estimate, the blueprint, and the model. And these go from least to most granular, or most realistic. So the outline, if you're creating a building, just the box. Is it going to have a slanted roof? Is it going to have windows and whatnot? You could just freehand this with your non-dominant hands to make it look ugly. So you can actually show this to somebody, that says, okay, this is the outline. Doesn't have to have a lot of detail. It just kind of shows people what it is. You could outline or draw a we looked at a car. You could draw sneakers. You could draw a person wearing a scarf. Is all you need is the general outline to show the shape of whatever it is that you're creating. If you're creating a massage or physical rehab parlor, you might just outline the layout. Where are the offices? Where are where's the front door? Where are the table? Where are the rooms? What type of machinery do you need? So what's going to happen is you're going to create just a very general representation of what it is that you're going to detail later. And then when you start doing that, you start looking at dimensions. So are the rooms going to be, is the office going to be as big as one of the physical rehab rooms? Is the gymnasium or the pool going to be, which is going to be bigger, which is going to have more space for, people that are in the holding pattern that are supposed to get in the pool next, or people that are in the going to be in the gym session next for whatever rehab part they have. So the dimensions aren't just the actual numbers that say, hey, this is 4 feet, this is 12 feet, this is 16 feet. The dimensions also help you give spatial proportions between things. And if you're just providing some service where you are the physical therapy clients, are we doing hour slots, 15-minute slots, 2-hour slots? Like, how long do these things take? Which services do physical therapy appointments for knees take longer than physical therapy appointments for shoulders? Because a shoulder is a ball and joint, whereas the knee is just or a shoulder is a more complex joint, whereas the knee is simpler relatively. So you got to figure out those in terms of the dimensions of how long things are going to take. The intake part where they have to sign documents and get whatever materials they need for whatever at-home workouts they need to do to facilitate their rehab and whatnot. And estimates are also good, because what you're estimating is how much it would take to create that thing. So the first is you create an outline, you got your dimensions, and then you start to thinking about with the estimates, your time, attention, energy, and monetary, how much you need to allocate for that to happen. So if you're going to build a building, or you're going to rehab, or I think they call it retrofit a building, then you have to account for how long that's going to take. So if you just bought a building and you have to get it retrofitted, is that going to be a 3-month process? Is that going to be a 6-month process? So you have to think about that in addition to what the end layout is going to be. Are you going to have to move plumbing fixtures? Are you going to have to create plumbing fixtures, put bathrooms where there were none? So the estimates are based on what exists now and what will exist in the future. And you got the blueprint, which is also a more detailed outline. So the blueprint includes the dimensions and the outline, and it has higher fidelity specifications for whoever you're going to talk to. So a blueprint is something that you can hand to, or that an architect can hand to an engineer to have the engineer figure out everything that goes into that, whether you're talking about sneakers, a house, this shirt, which is one of my favorite things to talk about in this course. And then a model would be a small scale version of that. So, you might create with Legos your physical therapy center. So, you get one of those matte blocks and put the blocks on there. You don't have to buy Lego sets with all of the same color, but, because we like color for walls. Right. So you put all of the blocks to figure out exactly where it is, so that when you go on appointments to talk to architects, you say, okay, this is kind of how I want it to be. And, the architect will say, well, this is wrong because the hallways are too thin. So you got to move some of the blocks here. And then that makes other things different proportions and whatnot. So the model is a little bit harder to deal with because it's actually a physical representation, whereas a blueprint is a lot easier because, now with computer assisted design, you can, just click a couple things and, type a couple letters or words and numbers, and, the things will scale according to whatever dimensions you put in. All right. So Now this is all happening in a process of getting more specific from the beginning, which is just like a hazy idea in the back of your head, to being able to see something in front of your face and to have conversation with people because they see something in front of their face too. In a what's this? In a business, a draft might be a customer journey where we say, hey, customer A doesn't know anything about our service, then they want to know about our service. So we send them advertisements. Then they come read our blog, or they get a phone call, they hear another advertisement that goes into more depth. They do a little research on our site, on other people's sites, and, clearly and obviously they start coming to our facility because, they do this. And then when they get there, this happens and this happens and this happens. So the draft might not, drafts aren't just for physical representations. Drafts also include those types of things that are, more step-by-step representations. And either way, we're going to go from general to specific, and we do that in design, discover, and draft. So this is a model of prototyping or a model of a design process that isn't exactly doing what we want, because the prototype is a little bit more than a model. See, a model is just a representation, where a prototype is the actual thing. That's actually what we're going to get into next, or the next three phases, or the next stage, which is the create stage. And that's when we're building the prototype. We're almost there. So, and that's just kind of to show that different models of, processes have different, types of or levels of fidelity. Ours is 9. So we have design, discover, draft. Then we have the create phase, the create stage, and the hustle stage. And prototype would be create, and test would be hustle, which is you actually start to use that and whatnot. But yeah, so we're almost at a prototype where, like if I'm doing an iPhone, I don't actually have a working iPhone. What I have is just like the physical form of an iPhone. I have a couple mock-ups of the screen. That would be a model where people can actually look at it, feel it, say, okay, this is good, this is not good. Or you might have a computer that you just want to test, whether the buttons click correctly or not. Doesn't mean that they actually type and send signals to your computer or whatnot. But whatever you're testing, you want to have something that simulates whatever it is that you're doing. You don't need to have a full-on prototype. That's in the next phase, because in the next phase we'll be talking to and about supplier relationships and getting into the actual building of things. So we're not there yet. What we're going to be talking about, not going to be talking about. So this is not. This was in the one or two previous things. We had a sketch and a blueprint, and before we get into, after we got into the blueprint, we want to take this up to a higher level of fidelity. And what that is going to be between a blueprint and a model. So on the left is what we would think of as a regular blueprint. Now this is a little different, because most of the time when we think of blueprints, we think of top-down presentations where we're just looking at floor plans. So there's the top-down look, there's the side look, and then there's a angled look. With computer assistant design, things like Sketch and Blender and Bentley systems, being able to create architectural models of large and small scale things. The ability for them to render those in 3D and turn them around has allowed people to drastically speed up the process of communicating with engineers and architects and visualize what's happening. If you give me a top-down model and a model from the side and another model from the side and one from the bottom up, some people may not be able to integrate all three of those. But if you give them a live program where they can go in and turn things around, boom, that makes it a lot easier for them to see it. And these models, like we were talking about in the last Discover module, have different layers of information. So like, this clearly has some more structural information, and this is more service information, where it starts talking about, the what are these things? The pipes, the wiring, the actual girders that we have to build the structure, on top of which walls will go in most cases, or unless this is a what are those things? Gas processing plants, where you have these long, complicated processes, and chemical processing plants, that are thousands of meters long, and intertwined and whatnot, and they're not housed inside of anything. It's just the elements and the system. So what we're looking at is the blueprint and the model. Now, this is a computer generated model. Somebody might actually create what are those, Lincoln Logs and Legos, and that might be a model. It depends on how specific you want to get and what level of conversation you need to have with the next person. If you are an architect, then you'll probably be able to create computer assisted design models, and then take that to an engineer who then won't have to create it. They'll just tweak whatever they have. If you are not an architect and you can't do that, you might just have to draw something like this, go talk to an architect to get actual architectural renderings and drawings, and then they will then turn that into the actual renderings and drawings that you can then pass to an engineer, right? So that's why we go through the process of trying to figure out all of the stuff and figure out what our level of expertise is and what is the next level of expertise and next step that we need to hire or learn. If you just want to build one building, learning computer assisted design is probably not what you need to do. If you want to build 1,000 computer assisted design, you probably still don't want to do that. You hire other people to do that if you're going to build 1,000 buildings, right? Now, there's another level of detail, what they use, and it's called building information modeling. And what's happening is we go from programming, which is trying to figure out what is the purpose of the building. For us, that would be the design. Is it going to, this building needs 13 floors because we're going to house these many people with these many departments, or, whether it's a hospital or a, office building. So each level needs to have a couple of different things. You have the conceptual design, which is kind of like our sketch and outline. Then you have a more detailed design, which you would then hand to or figure out from a architectural perspective. Then you get down into the analysis. So those color gradients talk about the heat. So, what parts of the building are going to be hot because of the HVAC system, what's going to be cooler, which side faces the sun more of the day or year, which side doesn't face the sun. Is there a lot of wind going to and from? So what angles should we orient the building so that the wind doesn't knock it down? These are the types of analysis that go in the engineering phase. And then they also turn that into documentation that says, okay, so we need these, this much girder, these many girders, this much concrete in order to make this building fit these requirements. And then we have the next phase, which is fabrication, where you order all of the supplies to, from the manufacturers, and then they create all of the parts. They might ship dry concrete to you, and then you have a mixer on site that you pour the water into, and then that goes into the ground or around the steel girders. Or you might be ordering rebar that's already pre-cut, or you get it to the site, you cut it, to whatever specifications it needs, bends it to, whatever that needs, and then so on and so forth. We don't need to really kind of go into the rest of these phases. But as you can see, what we're talking about is kind of the analysis. So, and the detailed design. So the detailed design allows us to talk to the experts about the analysis that they need to do. All right. And so to be a little more specific, talk about these, the stages in relation to the Dream Create Household course. We have the design is the conceptual, discover is the site, The draft is the detailed design. We have the organize, or the engineering is the analysis and the documentation. The pure procurement and the fabrication, that's dealing with is the schedule or plan, and the build and manufacturer, that's about the construction and the logistics of getting that stuff to the site, into the right place, onto the right floor, etc. So in the drafting phase, we ask ourselves a couple of questions that help guide us and make sure that we are, kind of crossing our T's and dotting our I's, or dotting our T's and crossing our I's. So the first is, does your plan solve three of the important challenges for the operation phase? So in the beginning, in the building model, does it fit 1,000 people on every floor? That might be the requirements for somebody building a skyscraper. They want to create an office building that has these many people on every floor. Does it fit 1,000 people? Yes or no? If it doesn't, then we need to make it bigger. If it does, then that's great. Well, let's make it bigger still, so in case we grow to need 1,500 on each floor. So some of the things that you need to do is refer back to what the original intention was. What are the values and criteria that guide whatever your undertaking is, and figure out, does what you're drafting or creating actually fulfilling those in the operational phase. And the other part is, does your plan solve the three important challenges of the building phase? So what we just saw with fabrication is, okay, we got a lot of concrete. So in the drafting, you also have to think about how the thing will get built. So do you have enough concrete? Well, if there is a concrete shortage, how do we solve for that? So that's an important challenge. Just in real time, this is what's this, March of 2021. A lot of people are building things. So the prices of wood is going up. So, a sheet of plywood is probably double, maybe even triple what it was about a year or two ago. And that actually has a lot of impact on building costs. Same with studs. So, what was $2 might be $4. And that just sounds like $2, but when you're buying 14,000 of those to build a building, that has a significant impact on how fast you can get that done, and how much that costs you in resources. So when you're creating the draft or the model, you also want to think about, how does this actually solve some of the major challenges that you could be having based on what you researched and discovered in the discover phase. Okay. What types of materials and resources do you need? So in the fabrication phase, we need to have somebody build girders, somebody pour concrete, somebody to do drywall finishing. If we're creating suits, let's say spacesuits. If we're creating spacesuits, are we going to just use Gore-Tex and screens? No, can't do that. You need stuff that will not be penetrated by high-speed dust, and it can't really be breathable, but inside it has to be breathable, because we're also going to have a little thing that regulates the body temperature and the ambient humidity. So you might need that to increase or decrease the body temperature of somebody. So it might just be easier to adjust the humidity than it is to heat and cool the person, because humidity has an impact on the person's subjective feel of the actual temperature. So in the draft phase, as you're creating this model, or as you're fleshing out the exact solution that you're creating, or the actual thing, instead of not just the type of thing that you're doing, you have to also think about the materials and resources that you have. Are any of these hard to learn, use, or work with? So are there materials that you don't have the expertise for? Are there things that you have expertise for? Where do you find the expertise? If nobody has that expertise that how much will it cost to find somebody that knows this expertise, and how much do they charge for that expertise? How long will it take to become competent about these things? And, these are some of the things that you think about because you've learned in the discovery phase, all of the things that you need to actually do, or at least most of them, because a lot of stuff, you learn kind of on the job. And in this draft phase, you have to think about how this is going to play out in, whatever project you're creating. And then what are the dimensions or scale of this project? Are you creating 5? Are you creating 10? Are you creating 20? Are you creating 100? Are you doing that in a month? Are you going to do that in a week? Are you doing that in a day? I mean, I can make Indian curry for myself and my family in, a little less than an hour. I cannot do, if I'm doing it for 10 people, I cannot, that's not going to take just 2 hours. I just double this and double that and double that, and we're good because it's kind of the same process. But the chopping is going to take a little more time. The cooking is going to take a little more time, and I'm going to have to buy a new pot, right? Because I don't have I don't have the same type of pot that I use. So I'm going to need some of that. Or maybe I'm running out of spices, so I have to do that. So the dimensions or scale of whatever you have impacts the utilization, and the frequency of use of the resources that you have. So you have to factor that in. So that's one of the things. And then, how many total monthly and weekly hours will you need? If you're building a building, it's a 6-month process. Now, does that 6 months means you have to be on site every day for, 8 to 10 hours? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what your role is. Are you just the money? You might not have to go to the site at all. No hard hat for you. Are you also going to be one of the people doing, if you're a plumber rehabbing a house, are you going to be using your other plumber buddies? Are you going to be talking to the certificate people on a couple days a week to certify that your plumbing job is great and fantastic? Or, are you going to be on another job because you have plumbers and, you only need to be there for 2 weeks? You don't have to be there the whole time. So you have other jobs that you're scheduling, later in the week. So these are also, if you're managing the whole project, you also have to think about what other people are going to be doing, how much they're going to be doing, and, when they're going to be doing it. But in the draft phase, we don't actually have to think about which weeks, right? The draft phase, remember, it's kind of like a high level, what's it going to take for this to get done in general. So we're not worried about details, we're worried about totals. And that's why we have total monthly and weekly rather than what's Johnny's schedule, right? And also, in this course, like I was, promising that it works for business and personal. So, you might be here thinking about, okay, well, you have a personal thing where you want to do something in your career, and this might not, my construction metaphors might not be doing it for you. I'm sorry for that. But there's a level of thinking that the construction metaphors are good to explain, and hopefully, my discussion about the metaphors and, the process of construction makes a little more sense than if you were just doing construction. So what we're also thinking about is examples. So, in health, if you want to work out, how often are you going to work out? You don't actually have to detail every workout. If you're thinking about sleeping, what time are you going to bed? How much do you want? How much sleep do you want? We're not planning, I need 2 hours of deep sleep, REM sleep, and I can wake up at 3:34 this day because I drank this much water before I went to bed, etc. Like, we're not worried about all of the details. We're just worried about, the high level, broad scope things. In relationships, what do you want to do with your dates and your marriage? You want to go bowling? Do you want to have an adventurous life? Do you want to have a relaxed life? Do you want to have a mix? These are, very broad trend things that we're thinking about. Yeah. So that's just, kind of how drafting figures into thinking about these things in a broad way. Right. Cool. So the homework is to outline your goals, right? If you just get on a piece of paper, draw something that if you handed that to somebody would be like, okay, this makes sense. And, that's your homework. You can get a lot more detailed. You can go down to, your copy store and buy some staples, or order some high fidelity blueprints if you're doing something, and draw that, and or you can get your kids to draw you something. Find somebody that's good at drawing to create a rendering of something. Go to Fiverr, say, hey, you want something like this, something like this, something like this, and then you get it back, and then that's yours. That's something that you can use to motivate yourself. That's something that you use to kind of be a representation of what it is that you want to create. Yeah, because even if you just want a great life, you might go to Fiverr and say, hey, I want a scenic view with a Maserati, a 2-car garage, and 3 kids playing basketball, and 1 kid doing stitch work in a painting. And then you hang that on your wall because that's the life you want to live into. Like, that's the future you want. Cool. So that's your goal. That's the end representation of what you actually want to see. It could be you holding a plaque. It could be you holding an award. Whatever that actually looks like to you, for you, and to other people that you can discuss. Or it might not be you holding a plaque. It might just be, a degree on your wall that says void or something like that, right? And then what you want to do is, in addition to, or on the back of that outline, I want you to outline each major decision or step that you have to make. In the previous Discover module, what we talked about was outlining all of the features and ranking them. So when I say major decision or step, what you have to do in this stage phase is to look at each of those, 4, 5, 10 major things, and kind of outline, what it has going for it, what it has going against it, what you already have to complete it, and what you need to complete it. So, if you already know 4 or 5 of the skills to, perform one step or create one feature, yeah, great. If you need to create, or if you need to learn something or hire somebody to do that, write that down. And so what you're going to do here is take that list that you did in the last phase and make it a little more hefty in both, in taking it not just from the operational phase, but also to the build phase. So the operational phase, or the hustle phase, is, you using that and doing that on an ongoing basis. So if if they build McDonald's and then people work at McDonald's, working at McDonald's is the operation phase. Building the actual structure and doing all of the things to finance that and make sure that the delivery and the supply chain is connected, so that they know when to reorder burgers or fries and so forth. That's all part of the build phase. So the build phase creates the structure inside of which the work gets done. And then the work gets done, you hustle, you operate, you act. So what we're doing now in the draft phase is drafting both the operate phase, the thing that we're going to create, the thing that we're going to do, and the structure or system that's going to build that. So, yeah, so that's it. So I want to say thank you for listening to me. And next week, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about text or a test. So now we're not going to there's no test on this. Maybe I'll ask you like 3 rhetorical questions, right? But what we're going to do is talk about what it's going to take, or in the next phase, we're going to take you're going to start to think about what it's going to take for you to actually create that thing. You're going to be creating the actual plans that get implemented. You're going to create a schedule for that plans, and you're going to create an instruction set for those, to create the systems that you then use. That is the end of today's chapter. You enjoy your day.